Hello newcomers and old-timers, I am Cole Scratches, and thank you for joining me to take another look at what I found. Found footage is more than a film genre. It's a blanket term referring to any footage with origins that can't be easily determined. When you can't say for sure where a video comes from, you can't say for sure whether or not it's faked or real, putting it in a kind of hinterland between fact and fiction. It's not surprising then that a lot of movie directors lean into this by making movies about things like ghosts or UFOs or Bigfoot. So much so, you might even say the genre is oversaturated with it. And it'd be a breath of fresh air if someone made something new, something audacious, something spectacular, something that would breathe new life into the genre and lead us out of this limbo the genre finds itself trapped in. And maybe lead us straight to hell. As Above, So Below is an ambitious entry into the genre, following the young archaeologist and alchemy scholar Scarlett Marlowe in search for the legendary Philosopher's Stone. The search takes her to the catacombs of Paris, where she and a team of explorers delve into the abyssal depths, lined with bodies numbering in the millions. But ambition and desire makes for poor guiding lights, and within this repository of the damned and forgotten, they lose themselves in the darkness as they enter the final gate. Abandon hope, all thee who enter here. Which sounds pretty fucking amazing. I mean, I know the concept of entering literal hell isn't exactly new in horror, but presenting it as an actual documentation of reality ought to leave more of an impact, especially if it's done with a modicum of research. And I mean, just the title alone has me hopeful of that. Poetic, cultural, and implicit in the Alighierian writing influencing the film. And I mean, just look at the poster. Look at this thing. Look at it. It's beautiful and horrifying. But any movie with a poster like that has to be good. So let's sit back, relax, and watch what must be the greatest horror movie of all time as we prepare to descend through the Barrière d'Enfer. Ooh, we're straight into it! No disclaimer, no credits, the film just starts. Bravo, I applaud this. It's very realistic for how recovered footage ought to work. But the dialogue...
We've just crossed the Iranian border, en route to the Habala region where they've ordered the destruction of a network of caves.
Kind of shits all over that. She traveled into Iran knowing if she gets caught she's punished by immurement. So who is she recording that message for? Who would be there to pick up the camera? Basically, all of it is just exposition and tension building, as if a beautiful white woman traveling by herself in the Middle East in a horror movie isn't tense enough. I mean, if this was a lesser horror movie than the masterpiece that we all know it to be, then this would set the tone for the entire film. Meeting with her old friend Risa, played by Hamid Javadan, she crawls down into a secret tunnel to examine the ruins before the regime blows them up. It's good she established first thing she doesn't mind horrible, painful death, as it turns out the detonation is happening any minute now. Any sensible person would let history be destroyed, but she is driven by the death of her father, who was driven to suicide by searching for the same thing she is. How do I know this? Because she won't shut up about it.
You must leave. Now! I can hear them.
My father searched his entire life for this. I can't leave now.
Mystery, intrigue, where art thou? Hidden behind a wall is the clue she's been looking for, an obsidian bull with scripture carved into its hide. With only seconds to go, she scans its surface with her camera, a mad dash to document the clues that she may serve her father's memory, to understand the mad need that drove him further into insanity, that may yet lead her on the same path.
Hello?
Or she's already there. Grief may lead to obsession, leading to delusions and madness, but delusions generally don't appear on video, so I'm guessing this is God himself trying to tell her, "Stay out of my business!" It's time we get to know our leading lady, Scarlet, played by Perdita Weeks.
I have a PhD in urban archaeology, a master's in chemistry, and another PhD in symbology.
She also speaks 6 languages, has a black belt in Krav Maga, and a functional Ironheart suit in her briefcase that she built at the ripe age of 12 after being bitten by a radioactive tardigrade. And I only made up half of that. In essence, she is a remarkably accomplished young woman who, in an act of career suicide, has devoted her life to finding the Philosopher's Stone, as a way of paying tribute to her father.
So your father, there was a lot of speculation that he was mentally unstable.
Why? Because he killed himself?
No, because he thought the Philosopher's Stone was real. I mean, there are plenty of lost technologies that we still don't know how they were achieved at their heyday, like Damascus Steel, or Greek Fire, or the Antikythera mechanism, but we still have historical records that support the existence of those things. There has never been anything to suggest that the Philosopher's Stone was more than a pipe dream of alchemists. I mean, Nicolas Flamel supposedly invented one, but the only record of that ever happening comes from a book that was written 200 years after the man died. Before then, there was nothing to suggest the man was even an alchemist when he was alive. Then again, I suppose it is possible that he really did create the Philosopher's Stone and he really did use it to achieve immortality and great wealth, and then chose to scrub all historical records of that ever happening because he was a douche. It is possible that is the case, but you can't go around being offended because people think you and your dad are crazy for thinking that. It's not the biggest leap Scarlet makes. She claims Flamel's epitaph contains clues to the location of the stone, but experts have thus far been unable to decipher it. Scarlet believes the inscriptions from the statue contain the key to the mystery, but since she can't read it, she needs to visit someone who can. Her old boyfriend, who likes to break into churches and repair broken mechanisms. I wish I was making this comic book bullshit up. George, played by Ben Feldman, is a bit peeved because the last time they met, Scarlet left him in a Turkish jail cell. But when she tells him she found the inscription they'd been looking for, he's on board. With his help, they find the clue inscribed at the back of Flamel's tombstone, and with some national treasure levels of stretch, they determine the Philosopher's Stone has to be almost 400 feet beneath the surface where Flamel was buried.
Alchemists believed that the number of the devil was 741, then it makes sense that they would think that hell was 741 feet beneath the surface of the earth. 370.5 feet beneath Flamel's tombstone is where we'll find the stone. There are over 200 miles of tunnels right underneath our feet.
They're holding the remains of 6 million corpses.
Wiki Epiphany. The realization that the intellectual conversation you're having is based entirely on the both of you having read the same Wikipedia article. Speaking of, according to Wikipedia, the catacombs make up a very small part of the tunnel system, and while the ossuaries weren't created until 1774, Paris is actually built above a network of mines that may date back as far as the 12th century. So, if Flamel did create the stone, it's entirely possible for him to have hid it down there. The Paris mines are a hotspot for urban explorers, and if you know the right people, you can go anywhere. A mysterious boy whispers the name Papillon before vanishing into thin air, and with their goal at heart, they find the man in a nightclub.
Now, sorry, do I look like a tour guide to you?
Do I look like a tourist?
Yes. Their Virgil seems unwilling at first, but the promise of great treasure lures him. With Papillon, played by François Civil, comes 2 more bodies, Susie the Banshee, played by Marion Lambert, and Zed, played by Ali Mariar. 6 people strong, Papillon leads them forwards as they leave the daylight behind. But first we establish that the cameraman has installed pin cams on their headlamps, finally giving me an opportunity to introduce him, Benji, played by Edwin Hodge.
I don't know what to do, but you make up your mind now, okay?
He's coming, he's coming.
I'm not going.
The sudden appearance of a policeman lights a fire in their furnace. Their pursuer is lost in the smoke from smoke bombs that the able-minded Papillon brought down with them, allowing them to continue, to George's chagrin.
His little brother drowned in a cave when they were young.
Since then, the man has been claustrophobic. He was meant to stay on the surface, but the unreasonable hand of the law forced him down with the others. And now, here they are, trapped in the subterranean labyrinth of mine shafts, utility tunnels, and unmarked graves. In these tunnels, the dead outnumber the living 3-1, tainting the place with a miasmic aura like abyssal teeth nibbling at the skin. Such a cursed place has ghosts, and without even understanding why, their chilly lies lure keen listeners into the darkness.
There is always some weird people down here.
What other kind of people would delve into the depths of the earth? The sick, the desperate, the foolhardy. Papillon seems the first, as he suggests climbing across human remains for them to reach their destination, when their map clearly suggests a bricked-off wall to the right would be much faster. At the notion of this, Papillon snarls and whimpers, refusing to go near that tunnel. He tells the group how a man who lived in the tunnels for years decided to explore it, never to be seen again. The tunnel is evil, swallowing anyone that enters it, and only a fool would go there. He is their guide, and he refuses that route. It's a bitter pill to swallow, but between a map and the man who knows the terrain, they put their judgment in Papillon, despite the barbaric route he chooses for them. But God is anything but fair. Most of the disturbed explorers make their way through, but Benji, who is the most fearful over crawling over bones, finds himself trapped by the narrow space, and the ground starts to rumble. It's only just he manages to free himself and join the others before the tunnel collapses, but things aren't as they should be. They're not in the tunnel Papillon meant to take them. It's as if they crawled in a circle back to the tunnel they came from, except now the only tunnel available is the one Papillon refused.
Because fuck you, this is a horror movie!
What is there to do but move forwards? The cursed tunnel is the only option. There's barely enough time for the group to catch their breaths before the wrongness of the place is made manifest. Papillon has a habit of marking the tunnels he's entered, and soon enough they find his mark on the wall. It's wrong. He's never been here. That tag shouldn't be here. With their guide left blind and dumb, there's more to be found. A piano is propped up against a wall. Eerily familiar to George, it looks exactly like the one he had in his house as a child, when his brother was still alive.
Danny and I used to play it all the time. We only knew one song. We could never finish it because the A4 key was fucked up. What's going on?
And now we're getting into the shtick of the movie. As above, so below. It's not just a cool-sounding bit of nonsense that the scriptwriters cobbled together. It's actually a reference to the principle of magic in Hermetic tradition. Basically, it suggests that reality at large is a reflection of your inner workings, and it implies the possibility of enacting change to reality through your spiritual nature. This is a very important principle to alchemists, but Hermetic tradition came to influence pretty much all religious teachings that has been going around Europe for centuries. Now, Dante Alighieri, he zoomed in on this when he wrote the Divine Comedy, and when he described hell, he turned every punishment into an allegory reflecting the sin that was committed. And I know that the Divine Comedy, it isn't canon to religious teachings, but even today, when we think of hell, it is usually some derivative of the Inferno. What this means for the movie, what this means for the movie is when the characters' sin, their characters' guilt is manifesting their past in the real world as a punishment for the sin they committed. It's actually a pretty damn interesting and it's pretty impressive that the scriptwriters managed to link Hermetic tradition with its religious interpretation. So, in order to show my appreciation for this, I want to perform magic, and you are going to help me. I want us all to realize that this is a clever and novel way of representing hell on earth, and not at all a haphazardly cobbled together play on poetic justice that you've seen in 1,000 other movies. Okay, here we go. As above, so below. As within, so without. As the universe, so my soul. As I see the world, so it is. Did it work? No? It's still a boring cliche? Shit.
A warlock I am not, and thus find myself lost in the dark with the 6 adventurers. A siren, an old-fashioned bell, rings out from the tunnels, and the first to seek out the ringing phone is Scarlet. A weak grip brings the phone to her ears, and from the other side a voice asks why she never picked up the phone. So intimate the confrontation, she can't bear to finish it, but the handle can barely sink to the rest before someone walks out of the tunnel. It's Letop, Papillon's friend who vanished in these tunnels years ago, played by Cosme Castro. Unable to find his way and meeting the friend he never sought for, Papillon has lost all bearing and lets the spectre lead them seemingly deeper into the ground.
The only way out is down.
What?
In the kingdom of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. Letop uncovers a vertical shaft several hundred feet down, claiming it'll take them to the surface. And if they would stay true to their destination, it might have, but they're not deep enough yet for Scarlet to abandon her lofty goal. She reasons the shaft may lead them to the tunnel with their treasure, and from there an exit, and so, tainted by her desires, the group descends into the madness, and with it, further memories. Distant and echoing, the sound becomes as if underwater before a mountainous bellow leaves the walls shaking from its ferocity, and in a brief glimpse a young boy manifests in a branching tunnel.
What was that?
The question is not what was that, but who was that?
I'm assuming it was George. But I must say, he is being strangely calm about this whole thing. I mean, if you dragged a person that don't like tight spaces down a narrow tunnel hundreds of feet beneath the surface of the earth, while the roof is cracking above their heads, I'd kind of expect them to crawl into a sobbing, unmoving ball of terror.
Not only did he keep his cool as the roof was caving in, faced with a dead end even Letop didn't see coming, he remains cognizant enough to help Scarlet solve a riddle that would either open an ancient sliding door or send the whole cave down on them. But they do find their way into a Templar burial chamber, and from there, the treasure hoard proper.
Let's not celebrate until we're out of here.
Not the most consistent writing on this one.
Scarlet, how are these torches still lit?
The Philosopher's Stone can fuel a lamp for eternity.
Which... yeah, actually it can. I wasn't gonna question it because... horror movie. Logic tends to leap out the window when you don't question things like this, but... it's kind of impressive what a catch-all for tropey bullshit the Philosopher's Stone is.
But where is it? Could the horribly out-of-place Egyptian stela be a clue? Might it be behind the red disc in the corner? It was! Kind of underwhelming reveal.
What better place to hide the most valuable stone ever known than next to riches you could never miss?
Because piecing together clues that you need lifelong scholarly knowledge to understand, while navigating a subterranean labyrinth and disarming traps that will kill you if you get them wrong, that's something that any 14th century grave robber could do. And not something that was specifically designed to keep out anyone not worthy of possessing the stone. No. No, we need one last test of wisdom right at the end, just in case.
Wait, stop! It's a trap!
Okay, maybe Flamel foresaw this.
It's nothing short of a miracle that only let Top vanish beneath the rockfall. Susie receives the brunt of the hurt, but even then all she suffers is a cut open arm. Nothing some 14th century magic can't heal.
How did you do that?
The stone.
And while the stone could potentially keep them all alive until the bedrock is withered away by wind and rain, it would be more convenient for there to be a way out. Luckily, Scarlet is a good egg, and interprets the symbols on the wall.
This is as above, so below. That phrase is believed to be the key to all magic. Basically, as I believe the world to be, so it is.
What I like about this is how hard the writers work to make all of this sound profound and esoteric. And then...
As above, so below. So if they carved a door on the ceiling...
It means Exodus in the floor. Ancient concept that accurately phrases the dichotomy between human experience and external reality. Echoing through millennia from ancient philosophy to modern quantum mechanics! Stripped of all its profundity and degenerated into a literal instruction for a riddle a first grader could figure out. Excuse me, I need to be alone for a while.
Their academia serves them well, as indeed the floor hides further tunnels running even deeper. How this could be an exit is unanswered, but much like when they first entered the tunnels, this is their only option. But even then, a message for any would-be thieves that somehow survived the final trap, Flamel offers a grave warning.
What does it say?
Abandon all hope, ye who enter here.
According to mythology, that's the inscription over the gates of hell.
Okay, first of all, the Divine Comedy is not mythology. It's fanfiction. Religious fanfiction. Secondly, translator boy. Ye isn't pronounced ye. It's the.
I'm not going in there.
I thought you didn't believe in any of this.
I don't.
At what point have you not? You're the one who said the tunnel was evil. You're the one who have been slapped in the face again and again with weirdness. Far as I can tell, you've been the only one to believe.
And they should be made to crawl on their bellies to enter the kingdom of darkness.
Yeah, that occurred to me too.
I get it, you've read the Divine Comedy, I'm very, very proud of you. Now, would you mind explaining to me, if Flamel built this tunnel as a way to escape, if the trap was sprung by accident, why would he make it this inaccessible, and why have it lead straight into literal hell? I mean, maybe it could be explained by magic. And they expected there to be a tunnel, and so there was a tunnel. There has been magic going on for quite a while now, obviously. But the issue with that is, so far the magic that has been going on has been turning everything they were expecting on its head.
Consistency is hard. The further from reality you journey, the harder it is to navigate. History repeats itself, as journeying through the tunnels takes them back to the room they just left, with a minor change.
Everything's the wrong way around. This is upside down.
What manner of lunacy have they entered? Are the rooms changing? Locations repeating? It's not to be thought about. They need to get out so they can backtrack, following the steps they would have taken as if through a mirror, until a noise arrests their attention. It's lit up. Somehow he survived the crashing roof. Except...
See, that's what I would expect of a man who has been trapped on the ground for years.
While the stone can heal and extend life, it can't bring back the dead. Susie is gone, leaving 5 to wander the warren. Again their journey is mirrored. As they backtrack, every step they're met by more descending caverns. For every attempt to go up, they only seem to be forced deeper.
How much deeper? 1,000 feet down.
Feeling claustrophobic yet? No? Okay.
This Sisyphean cycle may eventually kill them, but their enemy is not a patient one. Within the darkness, the sins and guilt walks tall. A sickly woman, a dead child,
And a sudden drop down an abyss.
So the feast begins, and the tunnels are hungry. Hungry for the warm meat and tainted souls wandering its narrow halls. Tempting, luring, George is granted more visions of his brother calling to him from beneath the bones, only for Scarlet to pull him back from the open pit of insanity. What have they done to deserve this? They found Flamel's stone, the apple of Eden buried in limbo, 370 feet below ground, halfway to hell. In the distance, screams echo unendingly, and as if in a mortal trance they follow. The trumpet sounds, and the abyssal dark parts for the flickering of blood-yellow light. Fire roars angrily in the distance, 370 feet below ground. They descended twice the depth.
Okay. Props where props are due. This is genuinely horrifying. The prospect of becoming an eyewitness to hell itself is astounding, and I didn't think this movie would deliver. It's coming literally out of nowhere, but the build-up, the teasers, the sound, I almost don't want to say what's beyond that corner. Don't go near your phone! Disappointed!
Expecting the infernal abyss and seeing a burning car is more than underwhelming, but it's terrible enough for Papillon. Howling about how it wasn't his fault, he's forcefully dragged into the car by invisible hands, into the burning arms of the man inside, coming to suffer the fate of all Simonists, to be buried alive with only his feet above ground.
Which, it isn't entirely fitting, I think. I mean, this punishment in the Divine Comedy is reserved for Simonists, people who pervert Christianity by profiting on God's favors. And you could argue that Papillon was guilty of that because he was more interested in treasure than enlightenment, but that is a stretch. If anything, he was just plain greedy, but I can see why they went with burying him alive instead, because that's a much more horrifying death than watching him be forced to joust with enormous boulders for all eternity. The issue is, I can't look at those tootsies sticking out of the ground without laughing. Oh my god, you're alive! I'm sorry, but it's been so long since you were on camera. I thought you'd gone and died and I just missed it. Who are you again?
Doesn't matter, he's just there to film Scarlet and George. Encountering a hooded figure that I, no joke, thought was the actual Grim Reaper for a second, the three are attacked as stone golems explode from the wall to devour them, only to be escaped with George only suffering a bite to his neck. He's dying, and for some reason the stone no longer works. It won't heal him. In this, Scarlet realizes the stone she took wasn't actually the Philosopher's Stone, but another red herring, like the treasure. And the only way to find the real stone is to put back the one she took. Which doesn't make any sense when she used the stone to heal Susie's arm, but she's convinced. So, like a bat out of hell, she goes flying past the stone golems, visions of her father, hands emerging from blood to drown her, until she finally reaches the room from which they came.
I've rectified. Where's the stone?
And that's why she could heal Susie before. The stone was just a metaphor for enlightenment, which Scarlet had already achieved. She was the stone all along. This movie was supposed to be good.
Realizing this allows Scarlet to enforce her will upon the world, letting her travel safely through the tunnels. She apologizes to her father for not answering the phone the night he killed himself, absolving her of all her guilt, and then reviving George with a kiss that heals his wounds. At least the mortal ones. Nevertheless, they're still trapped in this hell with no way out. but upon coming across yet another pit, Scarlet realizes the way to rectify and repent. What sins hold them down here? Why does George keep seeing his brother? Because he blames himself for his brother's death. He failed to save him, and his brother died waiting for help. And Zed has a child he never sees, and refuses responsibility for, even though he knows it's his.
Question: if the woman with a child was Zed's sin, why did she kill Benji? Because consistency is hard.
With all their sins in the open, they accept their fate and jumps. The fall seems to reach the very bottom of the earth before they miraculously land and survive. No doors, no tunnels, they're trapped again. Or maybe they still need to go even deeper. Pushing the metal lid on the floor, the sight leaves them stunned. It's the Paris night sky beneath their feet.
Which I have to admit kind of gels with the symbolism of the Divine Comedy. Upon reaching the lowest pit of hell, if you go even further, you arrive at the foot of Mount Purgatory on the other side of the earth. Ironically, the only way to escape hell is to descend through it back to the surface. And that was, as above, so below. It can't be rectified.
God, this film is frustrating. On paper, it's my wet dream. The concept is solid. The mythology largely holds up. It doesn't try to be funny or cheesy, but works to genuinely unnerve and thrill. But while the intention was good, it just couldn't deliver on the potential. The structure wasn't thought through. For example, in the very beginning, when Scarlet tried to examine the statue, she kept spouting exposition every 5 minutes. Why not just leave all that exposition for 5 minutes later when she was being interviewed? It would have built up mystery and suspense. As much as I wanted it to, the way the mythology was integrated with the religious themes didn't hold up. They treat the Divine Comedy like it's biblical when it just isn't. Now, given that Dante Alighieri did die 9 years before Flamel was born, I'm actually willing to accept that Flamel would reference the Divine Comedy to explain what's about to happen. But the way it was integrated into the story, coupled with a very poorly researched material, leaves a lot to be desired. Traditionally, poetic justice in horror works by making the characters repellent and thus deserving to die. The movie tried to put a twist on this by making the characters seem innocent before their past came back to haunt them, and thus make their fates seem more tragic and horrifying. A very good idea, but I don't think it panned out. Aside from Scarlet, I never felt I knew the characters well enough to care whether they lived or died. And despite being given the most screen time, she ended up feeling shallow. She's a capable character with strong motivations, but there never seemed to be anything more to her. It's like she was cookie cut for this specific purpose, and so she ended up feeling plastic. As for the horrors the characters experience, I think I'm too jaded to be perturbed by any of it. You don't need to be claustrophobic to find the thought of being lost hundreds of feet below ground appalling, and adding to that the confrontation of past sins, everything you're scared, ashamed and guilty of is nauseating. In theory. But not only were the kills not all that interesting, because we're not let in on what the guilt is until it's too late, the fate of the characters more often ends up feeling like random bullshit. I haven't been this disappointed by a trip into hell since I backed Agony, but I'm not gonna sit here and say the movie is a complete waste of time. The actors did a very good job with what they were given, the dialogue flowed very naturally, and aside from the bit near the end, their actions never felt contrived. Further on, the effects and visuals are great. It's balanced between a more natural shaky cam and good establishing frames. Most of the effects were practical, and what little CG there was looked alright even if you could tell. Pretty much everything As Above So Below does right is balanced by everything it does wrong. At its itty-gritty, it's a very competently made film, hamstrung by a bad story and uninteresting characters. I sentence this film to a 5 on a scale of 11.
thank you all for watching. I have been Cole Scratches. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, tell a friend, and I hope you will see me again next time to take another look at what I found.